Harry only got 30 days as an accomplice, but John got 6 months hard labour, breaking rocks in the hot sun. Lovely. When Harry got out, his mum was very cross with him. "You're a beastly, beastly, beastly boy," she screamed, as she chased him round the dining room table, caning his legs with a stick. Harry was fed up. There must be a way to make some money. Then he went to visit John in prison. His mum had said not to, but he felt that he owed it to John, and John had sent him a plaintive letter, telling him about how bad it was inside, what with hard beds, and no telly to watch. John liked his telly. When Harry got there, John told him about the bird business, and how much money you can make selling birds. Harry was all ears. John tantalised him with stories of large profits and easy gain. Harry thought of his mum saying there's no such thing as a free lunch, and don't trust people like John. But John had him hypnotised with images of money and large amounts of it, and the easiness of getting it, if you know how, if you have the knowledge. Something about John being in prison gave his comments an extra resonance and importance in Harry's mind. So, John gave Harry the addresses and phone numbers of 2 of his friends, one who sold birds, and the other who bought them. The scam was one of John's regulars, and he assured Harry that it always worked a treat, real simple. You just go and get the birds, pay not much, and then you take them to the other guy and sell them for a fortune. "So, what's the catch?" asked Harry. "It can't be as easy as that." "No catch," said John. "The difficult part is how you get them back." "So how do you do that?" asked Harry. "Well, that's what you've got to work out, and that's how you earn your profit," said John. "All the couriers come up with their own method, and it's better that I don't know what it is, for security." Harry was impressed. He thought he understood the scam, and it sounded simple and straightforward. Go and buy the birds, bring them back, somehow, sell them, large profit, bit for John put aside for when he comes out. Nice. And Harry was mesmerised at the idea of large amounts of cash for a quick trip abroad. So he took the names and addresses of the supplier and the customer, and looked forward to a quick trip abroad and a fat profit. Lovely. Maybe he'd meet a nice girl while he was out there, and when he got back he could afford to send her a plane ticket and invite her over. Mum would love that, if he found a nice girl and then she came to stay. So he did it. The guy was obviously in pain and limping through the nothing to declare zone, customs official Eric Donaldson told an Adelaide court. But it wasn't until we heard noises coming from his trousers that we knew for sure. Harry Johnson, a 21-year-old Thai carpenter, had earlier been arrested at Adelaide International Airport and charged with breaching the Wildlife Protection Act and the Quarantine Act. Donaldson explained what happened. "We found feathers and bird droppings in Johnson's suitcase, so we asked him what was going on, but he went berserk and kept screaming, 'My wife shit on her pillowcase, and go!' The muffled noises continued coming from his trousers, so eventually we made him strip, and found 4 Thai baby moustache parrots inside his underpants, worth about $20,000 on the black market. Johnson's penis was virtually pecked off, and because of that his testicles must have been sweating profusely. The poor birds had nearly drowned. At first Johnson pleaded not guilty, claiming he was as surprised as anyone else when parrots were discovered in his underpants. After heated consultation with his defence solicitor, he eventually changed his plea to guilty and was fined $22,500. Donaldson later told the judge, "We've decided to keep them. Curiously, since their experience, they will only eat bananas." Harry got 6 months and ended up in the same cell that John had been in. There were all the stains, unmistakably John's, along with about 30 other assorted thieves, thugs, rapists, murderers, and worse. His mum was not impressed. When he got out again, his mum wouldn't have him back, so he went to stay at John's. It was heavy at John's. For a start, it was all on a small scale, as John was only 4'2". So Harry kept banging into everything. Plus, John had what amounted to a farm going on inside the house. Everywhere you looked, there were live animals, most of them waiting for John to feed them, which he did almost continuously, in rotation. The sight of all those animals getting dinner made Harry hungry, and John knew this intuitively, so he threw Harry bits of food, until the dogs started growling and the cats started hissing at the favouritism being shown the new intruder. One of the dogs bit Harry on the balls, but not too hard. Harry took the hint and signalled John to throw the next food to the animals. Harry was worn out and spaced out, and he slept soundly. When he woke, he found that he had been the centre of attraction for all the animals, and they had all snuggled up to him and fallen asleep, loving his warmth. He had rabbits and cavies all over his face, and a great big snake all coiled round his arm. Cripes, he thought, and wriggled free of the huge mass of animals all over him. They squeaked and groaned a bit, but all settled down again. The snake appeared to be asleep and unaware of Harry's desire to go to the toilet, so he went for a wee. But as he was weeing, the snake woke up and started hissing at his pecker. So he called John, and John rescued him, and tempted the snake with a big fat juicy wriggling live rat, which the snake slithered after when he let it loose. So Harry went for a walk and decided what to do. He felt very spiritual. When Harry finally got out of pokey again, his mum would only let him sleep in the garage. She called him a devil boy, and she wouldn't believe him that he didn't know that the perfume was urine and vinegar. Mum allowed him into the house once a day, briefly, to use the toilet, shave, bathe, and pick up some food to be eaten in the garage. She followed him around the house continually while he was on the premises to make sure he didn't steal anything. Not that he ever had, but his mum assumed that he must be up to no good. She repeatedly said to him that he should read his Bible and listen to what God has to say. And the noise of the traffic was unbearable. He couldn't concentrate on reading the Bible with all the street sounds. The garage fronted onto the street, and there was a lot of traffic all the time. Harry turned up his stereo and blasted out Black Sabbath and Sex Pistols and Nirvana, but every time there was a break, the traffic noise intruded. So he decided to do something about it. "You don't think of a Morphy Richards hairdryer as a dangerous weapon," said a spokesman for the Ilkeston police, "but the way Harry Johnson used it, it could have caused serious injury." 21-year-old Johnson, unemployed, had earlier received his 6th official warning for impersonating a traffic policeman. He was angry with motorists driving at 80 past his house, the spokesman explained. So he started dressing up in a dark suit and peaked cap, and stood on the pavement with his mum's hairdryer, pointing it at approaching cars. Drivers naturally thought it was a radar gun and slammed on their brakes. We had skid marks 100 yards long up the road. Speaking outside his house, Johnson condemned police conduct. "If a man isn't free to use his own domestic appliances in the open air, then I call it fascism. Anyway, I'm doing their job for them. They ought to pay me, including time and a half for weekends." So, Harry got a job as a traffic cop. His mum and John were not impressed, so Harry thought hard about his act. The best bit had been the lunging at dogs, especially the way the dogs reacted to him. The dogs liked him, and he liked the dogs. So he decided to go doggy and learn from them. So he went and found a pack of wild feral dogs, and spent many a happy afternoon romping and playing with them, and learning their language. And he got good at it. His mum and John were a bit bothered, as he kept barking and growling in the middle of conversations, and started acting more and more like the dogs, even down to eating his dinner out of a bowl and being aggressive if anyone tried to talk to him while he was eating. He practised hard and got good, and then he entered the competition. Although the standard of performance among all 35 contestants was unusually high, Harry Johnson is the unanimous choice of the judges, said an official as he announced the winner of the Nakhon Ratchasima Canine Copycat Contest, held in northern Thailand to publicise an anti-rabies campaign. His ability to mimic man's best friend in all his moods was quite astonishing. The judges were particularly impressed by his displays of belligerence and amorousness, and his barking at strangers and playing dead were highly recommended. But it is for his howling at the moon and his highly original rubbing against a leg and urinating on a lamppost that he will be best remembered. Harry was very happy. He had won. He was the best. He went very doggy for a while and scared the hell out of everyone with all sorts of strange dog antics. He worked on his act, and it mutated and developed. He did it on the street. He went into shops and acted doggy. When he was at parties, he would suddenly start going doggy and raping women's legs. Oh dear, oh dear. There wasn't another dog show for a while, so he entered the next best thing, the local pub competition. "I'm a student, so every bit helps," said Harry Johnson, when questioned by reporters about his recent success. Yes, it was worth the pain. "I thought my act was pretty unbeatable. I won the money, and that's what I was aiming for." Days earlier, Johnson had scooped 1,000 New Zealand dollars in Trader Mackenzie's Tavern's controversial promotion, How Far Will You Go? But at a price. I knew when I entered that I'd have to do something special to win. I saw an earlier contestant pierce his penis foreskin with a safety pin, and I thought I could do better than that. So, when it was my turn, I stapled my scrotum and foreskin to a white pine crucifix with an industrial stapler, then poured cigarette lighter fluid over it and set it alight. The act nearly turned to disaster when I started my African dancing, which caused the flames to burn my penis. The fire extinguisher I'd brought with me refused to work, but luckily a guy threw his beer all over me, and that put out fire. They declared me the winner, and I went straight down to the Students' Medical Centre to get my burns treated. Everything's fine now, the dressings come off next week, and I can pay some bills and buy some clothes. Later, Johnson's mother spoke of her feelings. Some people are calling him sick, but I'm just glad he won. I would have hated for him to go through all that and not achieve the object of it all. But he still hasn't got a girlfriend, and that does worry me. Harry was in the pub telling John all about this. John commiserated with him. Harry complained that he couldn't get the journalist to pay him for his story, and he said he'd do anything for $100 at the moment. He was that broke. So John said, "What? Anything at all?" And Harry, being desperate, and by now getting quite drunk, said, "Sure." And then the barman, who had overheard this, made Harry an offer he couldn't refuse. My involvement in this case began when a 21-year-old man, Harry Johnson, entered my surgery, complaining that 2 days earlier he had drunk a lot of whiskey and done something very stupid to his rectum. A preliminary rectal examination revealed a hard, smooth, globular mass. When asked specifically, the patient admitted that an electric light bulb had been in his rectum for 2 days. He said he had gotten drunk, accepted a wager of $100, and using shaving cream as a lubricant, inserted a 100-watt electric bulb into his rectum. The next day, sober, he realised he'd done a dumb thing, but thought the bulb would come out unassisted. It did not, and when he discovered he could no longer defecate, he finally sought medical help. Because this was a large object, maximum diameter 61 millimeters, total length 114 millimeters, made of fragile glass, special consideration had to be taken to avoid a breakage, which could result in lacerations to the rectum and adjacent structures, with consequent complications. The patient was taken to the operating room and placed in a face-down position with his hips elevated. The buttocks were separated and held apart by a circular metal ring. With the aid of malleable retractors, the bulb was visualized, but it was not possible to get a gloved finger over the maximum diameter of the bulb. Toy darts with suction cup ends were used to draw it to the sphincter, but 4 attempts to manoeuvre it out proved unsuccessful. After placing the patient in the lithotomy position, 3 number 24 Foley catheters with 30 cc terminal balloons were lubricated with mineral oil and passed over the bulb, while maintaining a steady pull on the attached dart. Once in position, each balloon was inflated with 30 cc of water, and 30 cc of mineral oil was injected into the rectum through another Foley catheter. A steady pull of about 5 pounds was applied to each catheter, and, after about 10 minutes, the sphincter began to dilate, and the bulb began to emerge. It finally passed through the external sphincter with no further complications, followed, inevitably, by a torrent of fecal matter. The patient apologised profusely, and left, and I never saw him again. I have since investigated the literature on this subject, and discovered that individuals in all societies are prone to introduce foreign bodies into the rectum, penis or vagina, sometimes for sexual gratification, sometimes for unusual psychological reasons. Recorded items have included all types of fruit and vegetables, broom handles, Coke bottles, a baseball, a telephone receiver, a pickle jar, the U-bend of a sink, and a lighted firework dropped down a rolled-up paper tube, causing massive injury, requiring extensive surgery. However, to my knowledge, this remains the only recorded case of a light bulb being removed unbroken.